They're dissolving this thing in a molten salt, and they're doing electrochemistry on it. Why don't they call it molten salt? They want...
Look! The Dungeons and Dragons ride!
I couldn't help it. I had to. Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. It's your T-shirted historian and our bro Grim.
Hello, I'm still listed as Chakar. Let me change that.
Hey, Dream Akuma. And Ryan's at work. He's in a software dev meeting. That must be as exciting as watching paint dry. All right. So yeah, today's topic is technological stagnation. Which, I mean, just putting it really simply is, for some reason, most of our TTRPGs happen in fantasy realms. RuneQuest, Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, Harn, whatever you want to call it. Matter of fact, Harn has got a Kickstarter going on right now.
Does it? Oh.
Yeah, it's almost out of time. Looks really cool, by the way.
Is it really expensive?
Yeah, of course it is, because it's Harn.
Harn was always one of those ones I wanted to look at back in the day because it seemed really, really simulationist.
Yeah. It's supposed to be medieval authentic. But anyway, yeah, speaking of medieval authentic, most TTRPG worlds, if every setting book that you've ever bought, probably from OSR to D&D 5th edition, presupposes a world that is kind of pseudo medieval. And by that I mean it's not actually medieval times, because in real medieval times you had to deal with things like open sewage in the streets, spread of disease, just all kinds of interesting problems that plagued Middle Ages society. But one thing that apparently never made the cut is the rise of any kind of technology, because the period of medieval society in our world is relatively short. If we take a look at our timeline of post-classic history, right? Medieval times, Middle Ages, what starts in 400, I believe. Right?
I think people argue, don't they?
They do, because there's an early Middle Age. Well, there's an early Middle Ages that actually starts earlier than that. But
yeah,
we'll just spitball and say
definitely post-Roman.
Yeah. About sometime between 400 and 500, because you have the ancient Iron Age that goes on until almost 500.
Yeah, seeing what the consensus is.
and then the feudalism, manorialism system happens like around 750 or so, which is really where we get most of our medieval stuff from. Because that's when
so Wikipedia seems to think it's from the 5th century, so 400s, to the late 15th century, so 1400s. I was always taught 600 or 900 through to about 1600. So
okay,
I think it's changed.
and so 1500s, right? You want to say that's about the time when the Middle Ages ends.
Yeah,
and that's when like Renaissance begins, which is where you get all the really nice plate armor and. Well, actually, sometimes earlier than that. When do we cite Renaissance?
Renaissance 1400s, isn't it? It's later in England. The English Renaissance isn't until the 1600s, I think.
Mm-hmm. Which is also kind of important to note that different civilizations did hit their periods at different times. But by the year 1499, naval battles were going on that had cannons and ships. So just to put things into perspective. In 1100, the Song Dynasty is, in China, where they got the period of the Song, the Liao, and who's the other guy? The Han. They were starting to use gunpowder artillery at that point because the first documented use of gunpowder artillery took place on 29th of January 1132 when Song General Han Shishong used Huochong to capture a city in Fujian. And Huochong, it literally means eruptor. It's like a prototype cannon that was firing proto shells, which are cast iron bombs filled with gunpowder.
There was some really weird early primitive firearms, like clay pots on the end of sticks, things like that.
And over in Europe, we have one guy who we definitely recognize as medieval, Roger Bacon himself. In 1267, in his Opus Majus, Roger Bacon describes a recipe for gunpowder and recognizes its military use. He says, "We can, with saltpeter and other substances, compose artificially a fire that can be launched over long distances. By only using a very small quantity of this material, much light can be created, accompanied by a horrible fracas. It is possible with it to destroy a town or an army." So
we lost Greek fire, which was an earlier sort of version in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. So, medieval society knew, about gunpowder, and it knew about the destructive power of it, and they knew what it could do. I mean, it didn't really get refined until a little bit later. 14th century is about when cannons were introduced to the Kingdom of England, being used against the Scots in 1327.
You got to test them on somebody.
Yeah. Why not the Scots? One of those horrible Edwards. All your King Edwards were terrible.
Especially King Edward Scissorhands. He was terrible.
Oh, yeah. Poor guy. Couldn't, going to the bathroom was an ordeal for him.
The potato is pretty good, though. The King Edward potato. So,
Yeah, but that actually... King Edward potatoes didn't come until after Sir Walter Raleigh got back and brought them back from.
I'm just saying, not every King Edward is terrible.
Okay. So I mean, that's. Hey, it's a Victor.
Hi.
Hey, I'm sorry, buddy. Were you waiting long?
Oh no, like 50 minutes. No, no, like 30 seconds.
Sorry about that. So yeah,
do you guys have a Prince Albert in the can?
No.
What is up?
Yeah, and Dream Akuma has it right. He says it's more like a medieval aesthetic than a setting, and I think that's. It seems it, especially with modern 5th edition gaming, because like I've been saying, I'm past the point of any pretense of thinking that this is anywhere near like a true medieval setting, because we have we have a racial mix of people who are roughly the same as modern day Los Angeles,
Yeah.
including races like elves and dwarves and
All the
half
non-humans,
and
yeah.
halflings and gnomes and just tieflings and God knows what else.
Yeah, all those Asian dwarves living in the mountains of the north. Somehow.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, okay, we're talking about just human history when we discovered gunpowder and started using it as a weapon, and it's a relatively short time period. 500 years is not very long to start using gunpowder on a battlefield. When you think about spans of time, I mean, 500 years sounds like a really, really long time, but it's not.
I don't know that the aesthetic is medieval anymore.
It's more
and Victor-
Renaissance. So again?
Yeah, even later. And Victor, I think Asiatic northern dwarves actually makes a kind of sense if you look at the Siberian people, or
of course.
or the Sami from Lapland.
But
That
but
kind
then
of
but
look
then
makes sense.
but then you can put that aesthetic like in with the rest of them. You can you can make that culture like that. But what they do in like modern TV shows, it's like it's like basically Norse myth, but there's just like random diversity, and it's never explained. Like at least explain it. At least give me like a reason.
But I think it's more of almost a Victorian aesthetic now.
Cerulean Rex. I don't know about the first discovery, but we know that in our first recorded battlefield use of gunpowder was in China and East Asia, and it took place on January 29th, 1132, during the Song Dynasty.
There's records of them using rockets and fireworks for signaling, though, before that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they clearly had the knowledge of how to use it beforehand. They just didn't have a battlefield usage until then. And that was their first real cannon. And they knew how dangerous that stuff was.
I think current D&D aesthetic is kind of like, it's kind of between Renaissance and Victorian, because like when you look at like fighters and stuff like that, they're very Renaissance, they're very like Landsknecht, like that kind of stuff. But then they just add like random like Victorian like steampunk stuff and kind of like that kind of like clockwork shit. Like, so it's like this weird mishmash that is not at all like classic fantasy anymore.
Whereas there used to be quite clear aesthetics. Like Dark Sun was swords and sandals.
Mm-hmm.
And natural armor and stone weapons and shit like that.
Yeah,
there were metalcore.
Yeah, and Spelljammer was more Renaissance or later sort of style. And the more traditional settings were very high medieval, Arthurian almost sort of settings. But now it's all much of a muchness. Oh, and Ravenloft was very much Victorian in aesthetic, if not in technology.
Mm-hmm. I think that's mostly because of the newer fan base. I don't know. They added like this whole hot topic aesthetic. Like, oh, my tiefling is wearing like a trench coat and uses like flintlocks, and they don't really think about like if it fits, if it has verisimilitude or whatever you want to call it. They just like want to look cool. So, and that just kind of crept more and more into the whole scene.
Yeah,
I didn't mind the third ed era dungeon punk aesthetic. Sorry, Tisha.
Yeah.
No, you're fine. And yeah, I've been saying the same thing too. Yeah, 5e is Ren Fair in San Francisco. It really is. Yeah. It's like modern day Los Angeles dressed up for Ren Fair. Because you have stuff like full plate mail armor being available to the characters, and we're talking about full plate mail. We're talking about like the kind of shit that King Henry VIII wore, which was so finely crafted that it would not permit the passage of a pin into the joints. And it's designed to shrug off blows. It's designed to bounce bullets. It's designed to do all this stuff because of the way it's made with its deflective surfaces. That is available to characters in a D&D setting. However, that and all the accompanying weapons that went along with it. However, it's like the development of that stuff, you know, from the time of I want to say like halberks, chainmail halberks, presents a really wide period of time in our Earth history. Because we have like, you know, recordings of you know, the Icelandic invasions and all these other things, you know, with the Norse coming in wearing full chainmail halberks during the Battle of York in England, which was, you know, a much earlier time. I mean, you know, the Viking at Stamford Bridge wore a chainmail halberk, which is a you know, technologically it's a much more crude form of armor. I mean, it's basically, it's like, you know, chainmail links over a big heavy ass coat that you wore.
Well, D&D has always kind of done that. They always mix like armors and weapons of different eras. Like the rapier is very Renaissance. Like the rapier is newer than guns are. So that's why it's always funny when people are like, oh, don't put guns in D&D, they don't fit. Meanwhile, you know, they're running around with rapiers and all this Renaissance shit that was like invented like 200 years after guns even started being used. But, you know.
yeah, Lord Fulminay's right. Yeah, chain halberk was the height of armor for about 1,200 years. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Ryan asked if I can say that word again. Fuck, now I can say it. Verisimilitude. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Shut up, Ryan. You try speaking Dutch. How dare you?
Someone mentioned Eberron there. So
yeah,
back when Eberron first came out, again, that was a setting with a very distinct look and feel. You know, it was meant to be Magitech, steampunky sort of thing. But now everything looks like Eberron in some regards, but not in others, in a way that doesn't make sense.
Not only that, but it's like, you know, people want to cherry pick certain things. It's like, okay, so if we're talking about specifically, like Forgotten Realms, right? Apparently, the god Gond, is the one who actually made all gunpowder inert.
What a dick.
Yeah. Not only that, but it's kind of stupid.
I mean, at least they try to give it a in-law reason why gunpowder doesn't work. I can respect that.
Yeah, I can understand the in-lore perspective of that. But here's the thing, it's like even the process of making gunpowder requires a pretty decent knowledge of alchemical substances and formulae to begin with. So if you discovered gunpowder, that means you probably discovered a lot of other chemicals and a lot of other sciences to refine those chemicals into gunpowder or smoke powder. Yeah. Meaning, you know, why didn't people like have like early steam engine stuff? You know, because did the gods stop that too?
Yeah. And is it just gunpowder, or did the interference in chemical reactions cause other knock-on effects?
Yeah. Because, you know, it's like, not just so much gunpowder, but I mean, like we have so many things that modern science developed using reactive effects. I mean, you know, nuclear reactors for one thing. Hello, but it just doesn't make any sense. It's, you know, gods just cherry pick what sciences and stuff that their people can have to keep them technologically stagnated. I just don't buy that, man.
Yeah. And what about air guns? Air guns go back to what, the 1580s at least?
Earlier, if you really want to consider natives using blowguns and blowpipes
and things like that. So what is the god gonna get rid of air pressure at some point? Because if gunpowder stopped working, people would just move to something else.
I mean, why didn't he stop longbows from being used? Because longbows were terror of the battlefield. They killed lots and lots of people during our medieval ages. I can only imagine in a medieval society what giant groups of longbowmen could do.
I did read a book series recently where the gods literally do stuff like that. They had like a very tight grip on like this continent. They like basically like gave everyone like, you know, certain laws, and those laws also like affected like physics and stuff like that. and then some group managed to kill the gods, and everything collapsed, and like everything just fucking went to shit. But they actually explained it really well, like why each god had like these certain like laws that, like I said, also affected physics. Like it was like very tied into like, you know, their commandments and stuff like that. So they didn't just like gloss over it. So as long as you give it like good world building, like I don't mind if a god says like, yeah, no gunpowder for you.
Yeah, but it's not good world building. Is kind of my whole point.
Yeah,
Is
can
it?
you bring back up that
Well-
comment about owlbears?
Yeah.
No, but okay, if you look at real religion, God says like don't eat fish on a certain day. Like
yeah,
God rules are arbitrary. So why couldn't the god arbitrarily say like, hey, no gunpowder for you? Like I'm fine with that as long as you give it like a good world building reason. You actually tie it into like, you know, the lore of that deity. That you actually like, you know, write some commandment where like, you know, it gives them a reason to like say that. Like I don't know.
It does have to make sense, but it has to make sense internally according to its own internal rules.
Yeah.
That's something that's really important in fiction, and that people seem to constantly underrate these days. And owlbears were the result of a magical experiment. So yes, they
and
are explained.
I want to say that that comment also reminds me of your famous "Book-ma dragons."
Yes. Just because there's dragons doesn't mean everything else is allowed to be nonsense. And in fact, the more fantastical elements you have on one side, the more everything else has to make sense on the other.
Yeah, I mean it's like, you know, we live in a world, or I should say they live in a world with, you know, gelatinous cubes and ogres and you know, actual demons and angels wander on the planet itself. And these are beings that are infinitely older than all of the races on the planet itself, including gods. So and none of these guys ever got it into their head. It's like, hey, guess what? If you put these two chemicals together, it goes boom. Or hey, you know, if you take these two metals and you throw some, you put some heat with some water, it'll make an engine that'll make stuff grind out faster. I don't, you know.
But in the real world, the Romans invented the steam engine, but they didn't see any use for it and just treated it like a toy. Hero's engine is one of the earliest forms. It's basically a ball that span under the power of steam. And if they'd figured out, you know, we could hook a belt up to that, things could have been very different.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's like I've mentioned before, you know, they had things like the Archimedes screw for getting water out. They had inventors back in Roman times who built all kinds of stuff. But frequently it was emperors and stuff that were stopping some of that technological innovation because they still needed slaves.
There actually is a tabletop game that's about what if the Roman Empire survived into the Middle Ages. It's called Lex Arcana. It's really good. Check it out sometime. I played it. Yeah. Also, I want to answer Monkey Jeebus real quick. So my camera is mounted on top of my screen, which is pretty high. Plus, I lost the legs beneath my chair, so I'm sitting lower than usual. So that's why it looks like I'm a dwarf at the bottom of the screen.
Where'd they go? They just wandered off?
Yeah.
I mean, the legs on your chair just wandered off? What?
No, they just broke off because I'm big.
Well, okay. Then just play as a sniper. Game over. You went. All right. Here's the other aspect of it that I wanted to get into is the fact that if you look at guns in a D&D setting, mechanically, it's nothing but another source of damage with an ammunition type and a range. I mean, it's just, we're putting it simple because we're playing a game where great swords, a weapon that is so big it can split people in half, is codified into doing a set amount of damage, D12 usually, maybe 2d6 depending on the system.
Yeah, and the arquebus was D12 as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, but then it had
Second
exploding damage. But yeah,
yeah.
Well, no, the originally it didn't have exploding damage. I'm just saying, just keep
no,
it
it did in
simple.
first edition. It had, was it first or second edition? One of the earlier editions, it did have exploding damage. Because I remember Grim asking me recently on Twitter,
Yeah.
and I showed him the.
Because I remembered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you, Ryan. Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, mechanically, like I said, it's just another form of damage with a range. So what's the big deal? You know, why are people so against it? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I wrote a whole book that's about introducing guns to fantasy settings, and magic is still a thing, and they kind of coexist and they go together, and you can even mix them. You can make magical guns, you can make magical ammo. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I like. So I like the idea of, like, you know, a 50 cal sniper rifle shooting a Vorpal round that can, like, you know, go right through a house. Like, so yeah.
Well, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me because, you know, again, like I said, there are races that survive on this pseudo medieval world that are older than men. So even if humans themselves didn't invent it, you know, and then you go back to like BX, yeah, dwarves were not inclined to be magic users, but they were masters of metalwork to the point where their armor is like the peak of technological innovation. And they never thought to use steam power or anything like that because they, you know, you have to roll steel and do all these other processes in order to make it.
One of the earliest uses for steam power was to pump out mines.
Yeah.
So it seems like an obvious thing. And we've got these weird spots. Let's like artificers can have guns.
Yeah.
Right?
They can
It's a
build
whole
robots and
subclass.
everything. So yeah.
Yeah, they can build robots.
So yeah, they started adding like all these little steampunk elements like as we went on, but then somehow people are still like, yeah, but no guns.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true, Cardinal Sin. Yeah, I forgot about that. They actually created an entire you know, you have two races that actually created metals that are endemic to their own race. You have elves created mithril, and then you got dwarves who created adamantine, which is, you know, the strongest metal known to anybody. They can invent these super metals, which require lots of chemical processes and lots of you know, scientific processes to create in our world. Because obviously we haven't created mithril and we haven't created adamantine, but just you know, the innovation of creating a sword with crucible steel. That's a process that required a lot of refinement and innovation, because it's like if you look at a sword from the late Middle Ages as compared to like the early Middle Ages, the technological difference in the two weapons is going to be like night and day. You know?
There are settings where it obviously works. Warhammer Fantasy is very Renaissance. It's like very like 30-year war. The dwarves have like firearms and weird like steampunk like vehicles and stuff like that. So yeah, you know, there are settings where that mesh of like medieval magic and guns and like, you know, that burgeoning technology like definitely works. If you want a PC game that like tackles that topic really well, Arcanum.
Everybody always mentions Arcanum.
Yeah. Have you played it? It's awesome. It's basically like, what if, like, you know, Faerun, like, you know, progressed through the Victorian era. But then technology starts interfering with magic, and there's like this whole like split. Like magic starts like doesn't like technology; it starts glitching out. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember the game. I got bored of it pretty quick back when I played it, but
you're an old boomer, so that's fine.
But yeah, it's like people just always make this presupposition that, you know, like, oh, we got magic, so inventions would never happen.
Yeah.
Like, that's not true. Not at all. Most of our inventions that have exist today that we take for granted are either accidents, byproducts, or just a simple fact of somebody didn't want to pay for something. I mean, you know, like, go ahead.
Go on.
Well, it's like, okay, the guy who invented Kraft cheese, right? All he was looking for was a way to preserve cheese, so he started putting it in jars, and then figuring out the exact process needed, you know, for heating it up and keeping it preserved so it could be shelf stable for a long time. I mean, that's something a medieval person could do, but they didn't.
So I think the but there's magic argument can be a good one. A lot of it depends on how ubiquitous magic is in the setting. So in modern D&D, magic is everywhere and in everything. And so it makes a lot more sense. If magic users are rarer, if actually empowered clerics and so on are rarer, then there's much more need for technology to fill a gap because you don't have enough magic users. You know, you can't produce enough magic items to meet the demand, and so these other things become more important. But traditionalism is also a very strong force. People don't like to change things unless they have to a lot of the time. Like one of my first jobs was working for a stationery company called Gilbert Nystay, and we were moving their data from their old system onto their new system. So the system that they were using was a pre-DOS terminal system with the terminal system laid on top, and then a Windows 3 laid on top of that.
That's more common than you think, by the way.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's a programmer, and he still has to go out and do COBOL stuff. That's like a coding thing from like the 1960s.
I remember.
And this is
COBOL.
for like big companies. So
yeah, it's what part of the reason Y2K was actually a big deal, and it's a good thing that people did what they did. Yeah, so there's a lot of resistance to anything newfangled. Yeah, and if magic works, we don't need it.
I mean, in Warhammer, you can kind of understand why technology could flourish, because magic is dangerous in Warhammer with chaos. So, and magic users are either, if they're not largely underground, they're very strictly controlled and watched.
Yeah, and they're mostly not that powerful until they get to really high level.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, if the one thing can happen, then why not the other? I mean, you know, it never made any sense to me why we cling to this notion of, oh no, must stay medieval. We can't. And I think a lot of it is because of Lord of the Rings. I'm not casting stones at J.R.R. Tolkien, but you know, he has that super duper detailed world and lore, and all that time happens where people are more or less kind of stuck in this pseudo medieval time period where, you know, nothing seems to change. I mean, we have 3 ages of Middle Earth, and battlefield technology never really advances.
But then again, that also happened in real life, though. I mean, humanity is how old? Like half a million years, something like that. And we didn't do anything for hundreds of thousands of years until like maybe like, you know, the last like 10,000, 11,000, we started like doing stuff. So like, what were we doing before that? Like, were we just like huddling around a fire and like, you know, with our flint knives, you know, slaying mammoths? So
I can actually
Flint
tell you,
technology is quite complicated.
yeah, the Iron Age goes from 200 to 500. Apparently, that's the point where we discovered a lot of iron and we're using it. And that's also known as the time of antiquity and Roman iron and stuff. Actually, the Iron Age in Africa was shorter than that. It's from like 200 to 300. So they just, you know, they had it also. It's like, you know. And then our early period starts, like I said, around 400, a little after 400.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, there was like 100,000+ years before that where we were just like, according to people, we were just cavemen. So, like,
Once you've got, so I think a big thing is once you've got writing. Right? It lets you pass knowledge much more effectively and efficiently from one generation to the next, and so it's easier to build on what the previous generations did. So, and that goes with the sedentary lifestyle and the innovation of farming. So, all that hunter gatherer period it probably went from spears and atlatls to bows, things like that, but not a great deal of innovation because we were living in smaller populations, more scattered, less brains to bounce off each
It was
other.
all
Less
word of mouth, like
word of
knowledge.
mouth, yeah. But then once you get farming going, and static structures, and people are living longer, all of that stuff, it kind of bootstraps and takes off. The agricultural singularity.
Well, I mean, if we go back to our Song Dynasty example, right? That's 1100, right? Here's what's going on in the rest of the world. Japan is entering its Heian period, which doesn't mean much to most people. The Goryeo period from Korea. But like in, I want to say in USA over here, we had the Mississippian culture. In Mexico, we had the Toltecs. In Peru, we had the late intermediate period, which was after the Andean civilization, Western Empire. And these guys didn't have guns. They didn't have really complex metallurgy or anything else.
That's why they got conquered.
Yeah, I would hate to say that. Yeah.
Because,
guns, germs, and steel.
Yeah.
And
guns,
the Toltecs, they made all the toll booths, right?
No. And the deal is, a lot of the native life also kind of made a difference as to what was going on. The Americas didn't have large ruminants and things like that to help move things along, for one thing. The other thing is Europe, pretty much all the way straight over to Russia, had lots and lots of periods of wars against each other. For various reasons, and
which is a great driver of technology.
Yes, exactly. And that alone may be, one of the great reasons. I mean, and the thing is, you could put that same thing on your fantasy medieval society. It's like, okay, even if you're not just fighting wars against each other, you live in a world where you have green-skinned monsters and stuff with weapons who are raiding you all the time. Actual freaking monsters out there that are attacking people all the time. Wouldn't that want to drive you to create something to stop them?
Yeah, you're biologically inferior to orcs, so you need a force multiplier.
Yeah.
Yeah, a shotgun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just.
So the thing is, right, I think you could wind the clock on in fantasy gaming all the way up to the Napoleonic era without having a severe impact, right? Especially considering the kind of rules that we're talking about for most D&D-like games. Because black powder weapons, long time to reload, lot of noise, lot of smoke, not particularly accurate until rifling becomes ubiquitous. Talking about snipers, well, in a modern game that's trying to replicate modernity, that's really deadly and and dangerous. But in a fantasy game where you're doing D12 damage, maybe you get a crit. That's not going to take down most things.
Yeah.
So that's one shot, and then you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
In Switzerland, they had brotherly love, 500 years of democracy and peace, and a cuckoo clock. Yeah.
And they perfected chocolate.
Yeah, they did, and stayed neutral.
And don't knock the clockworks. That's been super important.
Actually, yeah, because it's interesting because the Chinese actually invented clocks way back, and then they lost that knowledge. And when the Europeans brought clocks over to them, they were amazed by it because they had never seen it before. And that's another thing too. It's like our particular history has what we call dark ages. Not meaning that they're times of strife or anything like that. It's just they're periods where all knowledge and stuff like that was lost, and people basically had to rebuild from nothing. And it happened in antiquity as well as, of course, after the fall of the Roman Empire, where apparently people became so stupid they did not realize that you're not supposed to park your horses upstream from where you drink. Seriously, that was a thing. But yeah, it's it it's really confounding. I don't know if it's just people wanting to romanticize the notion that, oh, the medieval period, oh, we like this so much, this is where we're going to set all of our monsters and fighting and stuff like that, or if it's just something that they overlook or what. I don't know why people are so resistant to this idea that you could actually have a firearm. I've seen 5e people who actually outlaw artificers in their games.
I don't have a major problem with that. They were only ever meant for Eberron, but in terms of 5e, where everything is meant to be played everywhere all at once, that does seem a bit snippy.
Yeah.
I mean, the technology can advance at different rates in different places. Like you mentioned, the the South American civilizations, they were really good at agriculture, with the sort of stepped agriculture and irrigation, things like that. But they didn't have horses. They only had llamas. They never really got around to the wheel because it wasn't very useful in their kind of terrain. So you can get higher tech levels some places and lower tech levels in others. I don't know. Is it just the aesthetic? Because it's not even really the aesthetic of the medieval period. Like everything looks Victorian or Renaissance, like we've been saying, and they don't want to replicate any of the morality or the dominance of religion or the gender attitudes or any of the other slavery. They don't want to replicate any of that. They want to get rid of it. So is it just kings and queens? But then surely that's something you should get rid of if you're clearing out all the bad ideas from fantasy.
It's just this weird mashup of when fair, modern Los Angeles, and like the early 2000s like steampunk like movement, I think.
Well, it's
right
like
back, someone at the door.
Okay. I mean, one of the things that people overlook is the fact that the end of Kings pretty much happened in 1215, right? That's when King John of England was forced to sign Magna Carta at Runnymede. So that was pretty much, the end of Kings, as it were, or at least the power of Kings. That was the rise of, I want to say, not so much middle class society, but like artisans and
the merchant class,
the merchant class and everything else. So I was like, also, Joe Grabner, it is a fairy tale world, but that's kind of what we're talking about. Is like it's a fairy tale, but how come the fairy tale doesn't include things like steam engines or something as simple as Archimedes screws or or even gunpowder or anything else? And in case you missed it, Grim, what I was saying is the death of kings pretty much happened in 1215 with Magna Carta being signed.
Yeah, though it took them until the First World War to properly die, I think.
Yeah.
Also, if you want firearms, don't play Boot Hill. Play The Modern Adventurer's Guide to Guns and Gear. There you
go. Fairy tales. I don't know if that's an accurate portrayal of the aesthetic either. I think fairy tales are kind of timeless and placeless for the most part.
Yeah,
play with archetypes,
and there's plenty of fairy tales that involve more modern technology too.
Yeah, like Rumpelstiltskin and the spinning wheel. Spinning wheels didn't happen until I'm not sure actually. What was the date of the spinning?
Well, so people think of industrialization as being like smokestacks and that kind of thing, but it goes much earlier. Just like the water power, the water wheel, the mills that were fulling mills, printing press. This is all much earlier. And had just as big effects on society. That began the mass urbanization, the cloth industries, particularly the wool industry here in the south of the UK.
Okay,
that was a major change. So something Flight of Dragons got right, I think, was the water wheel was such a big deal.
Okay, so spinning wheels were originated in India between 500 and 1000 AD. And by the 13th century, they were seen in Europe as a standard piece of equipment for those making fiber into yarn. And if I recall from my history, weavers, people who used spinning wheels, were almost considered to be like sorcerers because they were able to spin this stuff into fiber. People didn't understand how they did it, and they thought it was magical.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that I should make a knitting subclass for the wizard, for the 5e wizard? Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Why not? I mean,
magical
like I said,
sweaters.
Well, I mean, like I said, that's kind of where we get the whole Rumpelstiltskin thing.
Yeah.
So.
Or repelsteeltje.
Is that what you guys call it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But the point is, it's like, this is technology that's been around and people just kind of like overlook it. And yet, they'll allow some technology in, but they won't allow other technology in. And it's just kind of like, whoa, you can't just cherry pick. Because if we invented all this stuff in our world, certainly in a different world, people are going to invent the same stuff or better. Yeah. Because there's more races that have longer lifespans, that have more writing and have more experience than the humans did.
At the same time, those long-lived races, elves, dwarves, whatever, people just, especially these days, they just play them as humans with pointy ears or big beards. But like, they might have completely different like psychological processes, whatever. Like they might not want to do that. They might just be fine just sitting there for like 800 years just doing the same stuff. Like, I always play this like it's the humans that are the innovative ones, that are the ones that want to like, because they're so short-lived. They have like this urge to like, to like leave something behind. They're the ones that want to progress and they want to invent stuff. Dwarves and elves, they're just like fine, just sitting there for like 1,000 years, just smoking a hookah or whatever, just doing whatever, so.
Well, okay, but even if that's the case, look at other races and look at their strong suits. Okay, halflings. Nobody gives a shit about halflings for the most part, but they're supposed to be like excellent cooks and love their hearth and home and fireplaces and all this other stuff.
Well, when you read Lord of the Rings and like the Hobbit and stuff, Tolkien actually mentions firearms, like when he's talking about the Shire. Like the Shire is actually pretty advanced. If you look at like the Shire versus the rest of, like even in the movies, the Shire is almost like, I would say like maybe like right before the Napoleonic era, like as far as technology goes, and then everyone else is just like still running around like it's like the Anglo-Saxons.
Exactly.
Pretty sure there's a mill mentioned.
And he mentions a farmer having like a shotgun or like a blunderbuss or something. So yeah,
that's exactly my point.
Probably because halflings are so lazy.
Yeah.
Right. So they want all the mod cons.
Yeah.
But they're going to invent all the mod cons. I mean, it's like, okay, even if you're just talking culinary arts, there's a lot of innovations that happen in culinary arts over long periods of time. I mean, one of my friends, Christopher Monk, he's a PhD, and that's what he studies is Richard. What was it? Henry II's form of curry cookbook, and tries to replicate those medieval cooking recipes and stuff like that. And I've actually found an old Andalusian translated cookbook from antiquity. I don't remember how old it is, but even as far as their cooking goes, the whole list of stuff that they were making over there, it has specific purposes. Like, he tells you things like, if you mix these certain dishes together and stuff like that, it'll produce, like a lot of gas or whatever. So be careful and make sure you serve this other thing with it in order to prevent that. I mean, it's like we take it for granted how meticulous people can be, and how formulaic people can be as far as putting together stuff. We keep hand waving everything with it's magic.
Well,
So
some of
oh,
the
so good.
earliest, some of the earliest forms of metallurgy and glass making are supposed to have come from the people tending the cook fires. Yeah, just as a coincidence as to where you happen to start your fire, like if you're on sand, and then you break camp later and you notice all this weird, sharp, brittle stuff underneath, or that copper has melted because you've had the fire going for days and days and days, cooking whatever. So that's a popular theory on how metallurgy got started.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you saying, Victor?
Oh no, I was going to respond to Cerulean Wax. He says dwarves most
Yeah.
certainly should be technological innovators, but they are typically reclusive. That makes sense. Like they probably don't want to really share the technology. The way I usually play them is that they are innovators, but they're much slower about it because they're so long lived. And they're like, to me, dwarves have a very like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. Like, if they make something and they like it, it's gonna take like a while for them to improve on it, because why should they? And that's the kind of thing I also did in my book, because I have like all these writes up on how like the different races look and utilize firearms, and I basically did that with dwarves. They're very like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So all their weapons are basically still like almost like Old West technology. It's like 6 guns and like double barrel shotguns and stuff, because that's the stuff that works. And like, why bother with like all this newfangled human shit that they're doing? Like
And
the more
Joe-
fragile
Sign
stuff.
of quality.
Yeah.
Joe Grognard has a good comment. He says, yeah, maybe people wanting to distance or disconnect themselves from current reality, because tech and sci-fi is also disconnected from reality by its advanced nature, and people don't usually want the mundane.
But they do in every other aspect.
Yeah.
The way in which the societies are run, the morality that's in play, the size of the cities and things like that. They don't relate to the medieval aesthetic that way. So,
well, Cardinal Sin is like, yeah, you could always pick up a different game and run it, and one that's already got firearms built into it. That isn't the issue at all. What we're trying to pick at here is the fact that we have so many fantasy games in the OSR and in, of course, just regular old D&D, from any D&D, from OD&D all the way to 5th edition and everything in between, where, like I said, their land seems to be perpetually locked into this pseudo medieval reality where technology seemingly can't advance or won't advance beyond this pseudo medieval reality. No innovations really seem to occur. The world never moves into the Steam age.
I mean, how old is Forgotten Realms, and how many years are supposed to have passed in the Forgotten Realms since it was invented?
A while, I
hell,
believe.
I have no idea.
I will do some research.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't read anything about the Forgotten Realms. I don't like it. I never liked it as a setting. I always thought it was just way too much magic, and stuff never made much sense to me anyway. But
So it starts with the Days of Thunder, which is basically Towel's prehistory, and that starts around 35,000 minus 35,000 DR. So
okay. Cerulean Rex, okay, you have a point. Yeah, communication is the real driver of the speed and spread of technological innovation. A world with low population with only little spots of civilization. Yeah, but we're adding magic to this now. So we're adding... We're magic in itself would enable technological progress, because you have people who can teleport from one place to another, in some cases across miles and miles of distances. And by the same token, you also have magical devices that can send messages back and forth at super fast speeds. So, it just doesn't make any sense. It's like, if magic is doing all the work of your technology, then you're still advancing ideas. You're still advancing technology. You know what I'm saying?
At the same time, though, the Forgotten Realms is kind of a realm in decline because it's all about like finding these like amazing ruins and like remnants of like previous civilizations that had like a way higher like degree of like magical mastery and like whatever. You'll find like some 5,000-year-old wizard tower that has like some amazing shit that nobody's ever seen. So it's come almost like a little bit like post-apocalypse in that sense. So I don't know.
So, Forgotten Realms was first published in first edition 1985, and the year in the setting was 1357 DR.
Mm-hmm.
It is now 1495 DR in the setting.
Yeah. And it says the Days of Thunder started around minus 35,000 DR. So it's like 36, 37,000, like basically like 1,000 years of history.
Yeah. But just across the playable editions, we've had a century and a half with no technological innovation to speak of.
Which I'm honestly fine with, because that kind of matches with real life, to be honest.
You reckon?
Around that era, it's supposedly set in like 14, 15, 1600s. I mean, there was some technological innovation as far as like weaponry and stuff went, but we weren't going around making steam engines yet.
And we've had smoke powder invented by the gnomes, and they produced firearms, and then that was taken away by a god. So, but they were actually producing functional firearms, not the early stuff that the Chinese were doing. So I don't know when you could compare that to in reality. First matchlock gun, I suppose, would be the closest thing. We were still using matchlocks in the 1660s, though they were far away not the most effective firearm at the time. So we could say 1600-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be equivalent of 1750. So it should be more advanced than it is, if there was any sort of similar commensurate technological gain.
Yeah, you see that this is kind of like where it starts to break down. It's kind of like you see all the innovations that do exist in the D&D game, and then you start going back and referencing how this was actually invented, when it was invented, how it was created, what it came from, and who created it. And it's kind of like, but if you have this, then how come you don't have this?
Well, also to be fair, like when was like the last real lore building we got for the Forgotten Realms? Like fourth edition, fifth edition. They started off with like some Forgotten Realms stuff, but they pretty quickly abandoned it. They haven't really done anything with the Forgotten Realms since like some of the early adventures.
5e is a weird mismatch of all of the different settings that have ever been created by TSR and Dungeons and Dragons, which is why
it's cheapened all the settings.
I'm not saying
it makes even less sense.
Yeah. Like even doing like the third edition and second edition and stuff like that. Yet like all these source books that came out that just like really like did some like amazing like world building for like the setting. We haven't had that in like decades now. Like they're definitely more interested in talking about X cards than like hey, let's do something with Forgotten Realms. So like even like as far as like world building and like actually making the setting like cool and stuff, like there's some stagnation there. So
I'm not creative. It's like we are talking about guns, but we're talking about more than just guns. I mean, guns is kind of like scratching the surface of it, and it's the biggest part of it. It's the one thing that a lot of players and DMs disagree on as far as their fantasy game goes.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about all technology in general: steam engines, Archimedes screws, glass blowing, all these technologies that we've taken for granted that apparently the byproducts exist in the fantasy world, but they have no technological component. You can't just say, "Oh, it's magic made it all."
We have all these swashbuckling pirates, but no cannons.
Yeah, exactly. We have swashbuckling pirates, but no cannons, and yet
I think it's just because there's people at the helm that just don't want to think that
Grognard.
deeply about it.
Toilet bowl of generic. It is. Oh my gosh.
There's just people at the helm, especially these days, that just don't want to really think that deeply about it. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that's the main
Stephen
truth.
Ransom is right. Yeah, gameplay is escapism from the modern world. They don't think about it. It's a game, man. Okay, I mean, yeah. If you just want to keep it simple and it's like, okay, yeah, put your sword on, go into dungeon, go kill monster, get treasure.
These are people that didn't even want to put in like ship combat rules for the new Spelljammer. So, like, what are we expecting here?
Yeah.
But why is there a dungeon there? Why is it full of all these monsters? It doesn't take much for you to become dissatisfied with, just whatever.
Well, what will really blow your mind is the fact that in the game itself, you have architecture that doesn't even correspond to the Middle Ages in it, because you got like high Gothic architecture in some of these settings, and I'm like, that would require a lot of technological innovation in order to achieve that. Oh, Wizard did it. Okay, well, where did he get the idea? I mean, how would he know to create flying buttresses? And I mean, is he like a fucking engineer and a draftsman as well? I mean,
flying buttress still sounds like a wrestling move to me.
It does. The flying buttress. I shall hold you up and support you. Then what? I shall hold you up and support you. Okay. This is what I'm saying. Is it just it just makes me crazy, because it's just like.
Well, we all know I don't like guns in my fantasy or modern technologies, so I'm not even sure I'm on this stream. But
yeah, I know you hate that stuff.
Yeah,
you don't even use guns. You don't even own any.
Yeah, no.
Way back on our magic episode, we were talking about how they also don't apply the effects that magic would have to the world at large.
Yeah.
Either.
Yeah, it's like Dream Akuma's right here saying, so why haven't people made technology to not rely on wizardry? Exactly. That was one of our first conceits too. Is it's like, if magic is the replacement for technology, then how come there's not more magic shit?
Plus, the wizards have a really strong vested interest in people having to go to wizards. I mean, that is another thing you can use to justify. Someone was saying about the dwarves being sort of self-isolating. Guilds used to be really protective of their knowledge.
Yeah. And
it would prevent it being passed on or traded with other people, because it was in their best interest that everyone had to come to them and pay the going rate, So that can be a way you can go about it.
Yeah, add dwarven grumpiness to that. Like, you've got a pretty good recipe for like technology stagnating for 500 years.
No, Cal, magic would not stifle tech. As a matter of fact, magic would, as we've already said, it would actually promote the growth of technology, because you have communication methods that are fast as fuck, that would enable ideas to be transmitted back and forth more quickly, for one thing. Not to mention, people could use magic shortcuts to make technology work. I mean,
yeah, there's that ability to like meld stone or something. That's one of the lower level spells, which is essentially a 3D printer. So. Yeah.
I mean, not only that, but I mean, it's like you have the freaking fabricate spell. I could make anything. It's like, okay, well, so.
It depends also on
Cardinal Steel. I've seen that.
Yeah. It depends also on how common is magic. Is it something that everyone can do? Does can a peasant girl just pick up some cantrips on the fly and just do some easy magic, or is it do you have to go to an expensive magical school and study for years? So in that case, if you do have to study for years, what if you're a military and you want some artillery or whatever, and you're well, normally I have to hire this wizard who had to study for 10 years to cast fireball and throw it 6 miles, or I could just invent some cannons and then train some peasants for 2 weeks to man it, and I've got pretty much the same thing, and it's way cheaper. And if you have a wizard that's this highly trained wizard and he gets sniped, you're out a really big resource. Like if you just have like a bunch of cannons that you can like just like make the blacksmith make, and you have some peasants that man it, like that's you know what I'm getting at.
Something like Eberron or Iron Kingdoms shows what you can get when technology and magic fuse together. Legend of Korra was quite interesting on that score as well. The cartoon.
That one almost progressed too much. Like it went from Avatar, like within like what 50, 60 years, all of a sudden they had like basically like 1920 stack almost. Like it was really weird.
Okay, Cerulean Rex, you talk about literary settings where technological advancement is stagnated. What are good examples of where it is done well? This is kind of
apocalyptic stuff.
Well, this is a dubious kind of series of books, but it's one that always got me thinking about it. Is written by the late Leo Frankowski. It's called the Cross Time Engineer series, or the Conrad Stargard series, where a modern Polish engineer is transported into like ancient, well, not ancient, but medieval Poland, like 1200s. And since he's a modern man, he sets about creating all these different innovations and stuff using the existing technology. So he invents guns using spark gap transmitters and radios and steam powered guns and all these other cool things. It's a good series. It's a fun series. It's a little unbelievable in the fact that the guy is a little bit of a Mary Sue and that he seems to just be able to create anything. But I mean, it's just like one guy with that knowledge spreading all that innovation so quickly to people. It's just, that was kind of my first keying factor in that, D&D is kind of messed up with this. The fact that one guy could make such a big difference in a world so quickly. But
they were asking for examples of where the stagnation is done right.
Oh, where the stagnation is done right.
Yeah.
Pretty much it's post-apocalyptic stuff as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Like,
Canticle for Leibowitz.
Yeah. People had high technology and then they forgot how to use it.
There's this book series. Is it the it's not the Amberverse, right? It's something with Amber, I think. But it's like basically technology stops working. Like gunpowder, everything stops working, and basically everyone goes back to like swords and bows and stuff like that. It's like this weird post-apocalypse setting. I can talk. I'm Dutch.
What else? Fade Out by Patrick Tilley. Weird aliens put these black pyramids on Earth that stop electricity working. So everyone reverts gradually. That's not exactly post-apocalyptic, but it's kind of good. Like Iron Kingdoms again. I mean, it starts from a high level of technology because there are already firearms and everything. But the technology in the setting didn't really progress for a long time because there was only this one guild that knew the secret of making gunpowder, and they kept it to themselves for a really long time. And then it's only in the more recent additions and advances that technology has started to creep forward again. So that's a good example.
And it's like we've mentioned, the rate of technology advanced across different civilizations at different times. Like I said, battlefield use of gunpowder was in the 1100s in China, but it wasn't until the 1300s in England where it was being used pretty regularly. So that's a 200-year difference.
History is a good place to look, actually. I mean, China had like 10,000 years where barely anything changed at all for anybody, but that was largely because they felt that they had everything that they needed. And why break it if it's not broken until outsiders came along?
Status quo.
Yeah, I was thinking of the Amberverse with an E, not A. So yeah, it's kind of different, but it's like suddenly just like steam engines, black powder, like anything like energy related like that stops working, and like Earth just falls back into like a feudal era. It's pretty interesting.
Numenera, weirdly, it's kind of a post-technological society because there have been so many different civilizations and all of their stuff is layered one on top of the other. So everything is might as well
Oh.
just be magic. Yes,
this is
gore
your
is
wheelhouse.
Yes, gore is a great example. So, in
They
the
just
gore
have
series,
BDSM technology.
they do have very well. See, they're very advanced in some ways. So they
Yeah.
have serums
Yeah.
that can keep you alive indefinitely unless you die
Yeah.
a violent death. They can heal virtually any injury. There's a whole bunch of other high tech stuff. But in terms of warfare and stuff, it's just crossbows and blades. But
Yeah.
that's because a race of super intelligent giant ants suppress it because they want to keep people in a state of nature.
They have really advanced nipple clamps.
Yes.
Okay.
Very advanced.
Okay, I gotta address this. Okay, I'm not creative. England did not have gunpowder till the 1400s. No, sir, that is not correct. As I cited earlier, Roger Bacon in 1267 in his Opus Magus describes a recipe for gunpowder and recognized its military use. The quote is, "We can, with saltpeter and other substances, compose artificially a fire that can be launched over long distances. By only using a very small quantity of this material, much light can be created accompanied by a horrible fracas. It is possible with it to destroy a town or an army." That's 1267. So
we first used cannons in the 14th century, 1327, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Early battlefield cannons in the Middle Ages were kind of crap. They wouldn't be that powerful to start with, but you know, if we already have firearms rules.
The founder of the modern Netherlands, William of Orange, he was actually the first person, like the first like political, like big political figure that was assassinated by a firearm in like history.
Mm-hmm.
This was like 1580 something.
Well, I mean, okay, here's a weird disconnect on technology. Crossbows are actually more technologically sophisticated than bows. And one of those killed Richard the Lionheart. But people just kind of like overlooked that as a product of later medieval technology.
I mean, aside from the chemical processes involved in making black powder, a crossbow was probably just as advanced as a firearm at that time, maybe even more so. A firearm was just like a metal tube, and then you had like a mechanism to make like a lit little
Flash
piece
powder.
of rope, like go into like some powder, and like
Crossbows had better range and better accuracy for a very long time.
But there probably also went more technological innovation in crossbows in the beginning. Like you had to like do the stuff with the things, the crossbow thingies.
Yeah, the arms.
The arms. There we go.
Yeah,
and you had to like set that. You had to like get that just right. The string, like the mechanism to release it, like all that stuff.
The stirrup hook and the crank version. Yeah,
early guns were literally just like a metal pipe, and you held like a lit little piece of rope to it, and like the powder would ignite, and
yeah. And now we got like junkies in modern day Earth who build like freaking pipe guns and shit.
Well, that's how the Japanese prime minister got killed. It was literally just like a shitty pipe gun, powered by a battery.
A 3D powered pipe gun.
Yeah,
or, I mean a 3D printed pipe gun. That's what he got killed with.
Yeah.
So, if there's a will, there's a way. The real trick for bullets is cartridges. Is creating the primer cap and all that stuff. That's that is the real hitch. But yeah, if your ancient Dungeons and Dragons society can have crossbows and it can have full plate armor, then it can have guns because those were byproducts of advancing technology.
Yeah, it's contemporaneous technology.
Yeah, if you have the technology to create one, then you also have the offshoot to create other things. Is kind of my point. It's just like, people shouldn't be so worried about incorporating firearms. And then, Joe Grognard asked, I said, what are the design difficulties of incorporating fast evolving tech and magic? Well, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be going fast. I mean, ostensibly, whatever campaign you're starting isn't going to be happening over, hundreds of years. So you're not going to see technology like evolve super fast over the course of a single campaign. But if you're running a continuous campaign from one end to another, and any amount of time progresses, characters will probably see like little things pop up here and there. It's like, one day, they're in town and some guy has, found some way to, I don't know. It's a good example of a tiny technology that you could create back in the Middle Ages.
Well, taking water wheels from grinding corn to hammering cloth, or an automatic hammer in a smithy, just something like that. It's a small change, but
here's a good example. Okay, and I should have thought of this right away. In the video game that we're playing, Pentiment, right? There's you come across a guy with a windmill, and this is in ancient England, and he remarks about how windmills are actually, how people take it for granted that windmills are pretty technologically innovative, because you have to have the gearing mechanism and ratios and all these other things. And Victor's people invented one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
we still all live in one.
Yeah. I mean, if you have windmills to grind grain, if you have windmills to grind grain in your medieval fantasy setting, you're already starting down the path pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, it's you're not going to see it in a single campaign. Like I said, unless it spans hundreds of years, you're probably not going to see tons and tons and tons of innovations. But like if you're setting concurrent campaigns to happen, in your fantasy world, characters are going to see things advance little by little. I mean, look at us in our own age, how fast things jumped technologically. I mean, we went from, in my era, those cell phones that were the size of bricks to, the little things that you got now that can do everything that computers used to be able to do.
I think audiovisual technology is even more striking, right? Because personal video recorders weren't a thing when I was born, right?
Yeah.
So people were watching things on film projectors, and had cine cameras. My dad had an old cine camera. Then we got VHS and Betamax, right? And then after that, Laserdisc. Then after that, DVDs, HD DVD. Now streaming, that's a huge difference just in my lifetime.
Okay, and I'm not creative. Yeah, the Chukanews, those were used on the battlefield, and they're actually listed in some of the rules.
Sounds like a Pokemon.
It does. It does. Cardinal Sin says no corn in medieval England, I'm afraid. Yes, but Dungeons and Dragons and all these other things are not medieval England. They're not. They're just not.
When we say corn, we don't mean maize either.
Yeah.
We mean like barley and stuff like that.
Yeah. And that's the other weird technological hitch that also kind of messes with the history too. It's like, you have how many times have you been in a medieval fantasy setting and you are served a meal that comes with potatoes? Okay.
You have no idea how many times I had to correct myself writing Whitechester, because there were potatoes, but they were treated with distrust.
Yeah. That's why they were given to the Irish.
Find all uses of the word potato, replace with turnip. There, fixed.
Now, let me clue you guys in, if you viewers are not aware. 1586 is the day that Sir Thomas Harriot brought the first potato back to Britain from the newfound land of Virginia. 1586. We are well out of the medieval period at that point.
And tobacco.
Yeah, and tobacco. And these are things that are common in medieval fantasy settings. And that's what I'm saying. We have this strange disconnect where we have a lot of common things that we take for granted now that didn't actually exist in a medieval England. And people say, well, it's not a medieval England. It's a fantasy world. They could have potatoes growing everywhere. I'm like, okay, fine. If that's the case. But if you're going to have all that, then you're just kind of explaining away how everything else is put together too. I mean, you got a great big world. You have magical communication and transportation. You have other dimensions and realities that intersect. You have other beings that are older than time and history who intersect to intervene on this world in real time. And you have actual freaking gods. And you want to tell me that this is off the table for raisins? I ain't buying it, sir.
Yeah, the existence of potato implies the existence of like Age of Sail ships capable of circumnavigating the Earth, and those imply the existence of cannons and preservation techniques and all the rest of it.
Everyone basically just has like a cartoon vision of like history and like fantasy and stuff like that, and that's just kind of what they cling to. And they just don't really want to think too much about it.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right, Stephen. Right, it is an awesome topic, not just for game, but for psychological discussion on games and entertainment. Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff that we take for granted or we overlook as people because we weren't around when it wasn't a common thing. You know, don't forget that the first jack-o'-lanterns actually were not pumpkins; they were turnips, and they were horrible looking.
Sometimes you just want to create an interesting setting that looks and plays cool, and you don't want to have to read a book on the history of the fucking potato to like have to write this shit. So I mean, I don't really blame people for just like glossing over that stuff at the same time.
Okay, no. Calvinoni, the gods are anti-tech. Yeah. Okay, and yet they allowed people to create crossbows, full plate mail, stirrups. Okay, we forget that the one of the greatest controversies that we have as medieval historians is the Great Stirrup Controversy, and that is when they were actually used and who used them first, because we still don't freaking know.
What about breeds of horse or farm animal? You know, that's technology. Selective breeding. Surely the gods would take an affront to that. I mean, only they can create things.
Yeah, I mean, and why didn't the gods stop the invention of longbows? Because longbows are probably the most devastating field weapon that you could...
Because God's an Englishman.
Oh, okay. Is that what it is? It doesn't make any sense that, gods would just pick and choose. I'm going to let that technology in. No, I'm not going to let them do that. Now I'm going to let them do this. I'm not going to let them do that. I shall gift them potatoes. I shall gift them corn. I shall gift them beans.
People get really mad when you suggest that, like, hey, maybe having guns in D&D is fine. Like, I got fucking, like, vitriol, like, all over the place when I was, like, doing my book.
Yeah, arrowheads, yeah. Near the Cahokia, yeah. Arrowheads were improved. Yeah, arrowheads weren't created in a vacuum, and medieval technology definitely brought arrowheads to a new level of sophistication, especially when they started making those tips that were designed to penetrate better armor. And that is not necessarily a thing that is incorporated into most D&D games, because people don't sit there and break down all the different arrowheads. Although, I will admit, Oriental Adventures did it way back in the day, because they had all the different arrowheads, because these were all in common use back in medieval Japan.
But we don't talk about that
fidelity. We don't talk about that racist book.
Yeah,
I was saying most systems don't have the level of fidelity you need to represent those different things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I suppose this is a discussion that can kind of keep going on, because it's the more you dig into it, the more the holes in the settings start to appear. And how much of that stuff are you going to just chalk up to, oh, magic suppressed it, or God suppressed it? Of course, my first thought is, if there's a god that is actually suppressing technology on a planet, then how come all the demons and devil lords and all that other shit aren't out there actively trying to promote it? You know what I mean?
Which could actually be a very interesting setting, to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
Like guns are like literally of the devil.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Yeah.
We make that joke in our game. That is actually a standing rule that we have in our game. Is that the byproduct of gunpowder is the sulfur and stuff that's used in it. Every time you fire a gun, there is a small percentage chance that you will accidentally summon a demon when you shoot it.
So what are we calling this anti-tech god? Boomer.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's I don't necessarily think GM should shy away from it so much because, as I've said before, it's like, you know, mechanically, it's just another form of damage with a range and an ammunition type. It shouldn't make anybody, you know, shit their pants with anger at it being incorporated into their game.
Well, another problem is, and we've talked about this plenty of times before, is that people assume that a gun in D&D would automatically have to do like 12d6 damage as opposed to a sword that just does like 1d6. Like, you know, people have this view of guns like being like this massive like it just escalates things like power wise, which it really doesn't. Like if a like you said earlier, if a like, you know, a giant two-handed sword only does 2d6 that can literally cleave you in half, why would a gun on like, you know, do more than that? But I don't know, for some reason people have this weird view on them.
Yeah, I think it's a case of either A, people don't want to have to argue the technology, or they don't want to have to worry about the implications of it in their settings, or, you know, or maybe they're just afraid that, you know, they're going to come to the same conclusion that everybody else in history did, which is, if you have these weapons that can do so much damage across long distances, how come everybody isn't using them?
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing, is you can give your monsters guns as well if you're worried.
Exactly. And it
goblin with a shotgun.
Doesn't it actually make more sense? Okay, Grumush, the evil orc god, has, you know, the evil orcs who are destined to conquest and everything else, and he's kind of demonic. Why wouldn't he gift his favorite creations shotguns?
Yeah, and that was
Simple
a big
ones.
underlying theme in Lord of the Rings with Saruman and the Uruk-hai. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
steel and gears. And...
It was inspired by Tolkien's experiences in World War One and what he felt like the Germans were doing. So
yeah. People can relate to gun damage and they know it's deadly. Yeah, it is. But I mean, you know, so is getting hit with a sword.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible. It's more possible to survive a sword hit, depending on how you get hit. But you know, people die from getting stabbed and shit all the time. So.
All you have to do is watch a couple of episodes of Forged in Fire, where, you know, that show where they make the knives and the swords, and just watch that Filipino guy or whatever he is, like slice a pig, like a full-grown pig, in half with like one blow with like a rapier. It's not even a Zweihander or like a battle axe. It's literally just like a rapier, and he still just chops a full-grown pig in half in like one swing. Like, swords are scary. Yeah,
it is, and I love Forged in Fire. Actually, I've watched almost every single episode of it, and the sister series to it, which is where they actually go out and test all the knives and stuff.
Yeah,
and Kit, we were we were talking about that too. Is like what the earliest battlefield uses would against the Scots in England.
Well, that's the 1327 thing I referenced, and they're not sure whether they were used or not, but they were taken north.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you know,
Welsh seeing a cannon for the first time. Look, it's a dragon, isn't it?
But my dragons. Oh man, I mean, yeah, I don't understand it. You know, people are afraid to put that stuff in their game. And yet, as I often remind people, high tech, science fiction level high tech has been present in the game since the beginning, because Dave Arneson himself included technological elements like spaceships and ray guns and all that stuff into his Blackmore campaign. And we know from history that Arneson preceded Gygax as far as TTRPGs. I mean, Gygax is the one who, put together the rules and codified it and sold it and everything else. But Arneson is actually the guy who broke all the ground on that stuff.
Yeah, much more of the Dying Earth influence, I think.
Mm-hmm. The Jack Vance, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, GMs don't shy away from this stuff. You don't necessarily have to embrace it wholeheartedly. You don't have to just say like, "Oh, everybody's got a sword, everybody's got a pistol, and everything else." But it doesn't just have to be limited to artificers as the only people to know how to make it. Besides the fact that if you just say only artificers are the one who know how to make it, I'm like, well, yeah, but how many artificers are there on your world? Is it just limited to PCs? Are there other artificers? And what are they working on? And how come their ideas haven't been spread?
Yeah. And if the stuff they make only works for artificers, why?
Yeah. Exactly. That made no sense to me either. It's just, yeah. And yes, Expedition to Barrier Peaks. Yeah. Big time. Temple of the Frog, Earthshaker, all these things.
That drow giant spider mecha in one of the really early adventures.
Yeah. I mean,
the walking dungeon.
That's what annoyed me when I was doing my Kickstarter and all these people on Facebook were attacking me. It's like, oh, keep your fucking guns out of my D&D. And it's like, guns have been in D&D since like literally the beginning. What the hell are you talking about? Like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Like they had laser guns in Barrier Peaks. Come on.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like people have failed to grasp is like it didn't really make that big of an impact on the game. It's like, okay, some adventurers are walking around with power armor and laser guns. Unless somebody is actively sitting around replicating that technology, it's going to be a novelty when that character dies if it's not passed on.
Well, okay, so like the fighter has a laser gun. Meanwhile, the wizard, he can throw fireball everywhere. That's like a BFG 2000 or 3000, whatever the hell that is. Like, just like at his fingertips, like multiple times a day. Like, that's fine, but like, a laser gun, ooh, no, scary dairy.
Okay, yeah, you prefer magic, not tech in your fantasy games until later levels. Yes, but as we said, the technology is already there. It's already present in your magic game from the start. If you have full plate mail, if you have crossbows, then you have the technologies necessary to create more advanced gear and weaponry. So
I've been playing that the second one of the Pillars of Eternity series, right? Computer RPGs. That's got guns, and they're quite fun in that, and they don't overwhelm everything else. You've still got magic and so on. And there's no reason why you can't apply magic to those firearms in the same way that you do to bows and swords and things. Really. Is there? It's just, it feels different because it goes bang.
Yeah, it just feels different because it goes bang. And yeah, even Joe Grognar is like, yeah, I prefer super low magic myself. I do too. But I mean, if you have super low magic, then that's definitely going to push technology along. And yeah. He-Man Masters of the Universe blends magic and tech fairly well. Yeah, there's a lot of settings. Thundercats. Yeah. Thundercats was another magic and isn't it weird that
Baslag series as well?
Yeah, children's cartoons actually made the best technology and magic. Thundar the Barbarian, I guess, is one of those best case scenarios where it's like, look, you have magic and technology. So
one day you're fighting an evil wizard, the next day you're fighting an evil robot.
Yeah. Early black powder weapons only work in massed ranks. Yeah, exactly. There's that aspect of it, but there's also all kinds of other stuff that builds up to it. Like I said, this has been going on for a while, but
well, Well, Thunder is like post-apocalypse, like far future post-apocalypse, and I think
It
it's
is.
implied that the magic is basically just like advanced technology to the point where it looks like
No.
magic.
Hmm.
No.
Gamma World, similarly, mutations and psionics, relics, and otherwise primitive weapons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In Thundar, magic is actually magic. It's not.
Okay.
It's not a science. I mean, Ariel actually uses spells and stuff.
Yeah,
so
but
do
did
the
they
evil
ever
wizards.
explain it?
No, they don't ever explain it.
So it could easily just
magic.
be like nanobots. It could be nanomachine,
Yeah.
son. It's
No,
nanomachine, son.
It could be. I think Pundit actually uses that in his weird fantasy.
Yeah.
In his
Son.
Gonzo fantasy, Last Son. Yeah, it's like it's nano machines that do all the magic and everything.
Yeah.
So. Oh, let's address the elephant in the room. Yeah, if you bring firearms into D, monsters get to. Well, of course they do.
Of course, yeah.
Of course they do. It's just.
But
for
how
some
well
reason
is
they don't.
a savage orc gonna maintain his
Flintlock?
like
Vampire Hunter D is
black
also
powder?
post-apocalypse.
Black
Yeah.
powder, especially black powder weapons, especially they actually have to be maintained way more than modern weapons.
Mhm.
Black
You gotta
powder was
clean
very
those.
was highly corrosive. It would gum up the works very quickly. It would like basically turn into like sludge inside your barrel. Like a savage orc that like doesn't even care about like showering. He might not fucking spend the time like maintaining his weapon, so he'll fire it and it'll blow up in his hands. But that's why in my setting, orcs love AK-47s because you don't need to maintain those really.
Are we selling guns into? Are you talking about like in your game? Yeah, why not? I mean, if you have a way to incorporate firearms into your world, then why wouldn't they be sold to the bad guy?
Blunderbuss or a duckfoot gun would be really useful in a dungeon corridor.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a duckfoot against a group of orcs in a narrow dungeon corridor?
What about
Yeah,
an elf foot?
Let me put my dwarf head on. 3 goblins with an arquebus, one to fire, one to prime the pan, one to load it.
Yeah, exactly.
The front 2 put it over their shoulder to steady it when you go to fire.
And then an extra guy to hold up the pavis so they could shoot from behind.
Bang!
Yeah. It could happen. I mean, why not? That would be just as viable of a battlefield tactic as anything else. I mean, if you got guys out there spamming fireballs and shit. But I mean, it's like, if you want to, I thought about this last night. The argument, and this kind of occurred to me. One of the things that would push technological innovation in your world, and one good argument for it, the instant a wizard created a counterspell or anti-magic shell is the instant that somebody said, what would be really great if we had some method of killing somebody that didn't involve magic and we could do it from a long distance.
At the end of Wizards, Avatar kills his brother with a pistol.
Yeah, with a Luger.
A Luger.
Yeah. Yep.
That's in our opening too, even.
Yeah.
Where he pulls the Luger out. So,
I only use
GMs.
the choicest references in my video.
I know it's a good video. We do need to update it maybe, but yeah, it's like GMs don't shy away from this stuff. Have a talk with your players, incorporate it into your game, do it sensibly. You don't necessarily, like I said, you don't have to. Your fantasy world doesn't have to look like freaking Blade Runner.
Hey, Labyrinth was full of whimsy, and that had guns, even a machine gun.
Yeah, it sure did. I mean, this stuff belongs there. Maybe not to the extent that you would see in a modern battlefield, but if you can have one, you can have the other.
Yeah, just introduce M16s and C4 and Claymore mines to your fantasy setting, and buy my book. Buy my book. I need money. Come on, buy it.
Except they should.
Please.
Except these Claymore mines should fling out actual claymores.
Yeah. I mean,
oh god, That's
I might actually
another
have to make that a magic item.
that is another whole argument. But yeah, it's like people who don't understand getting hit by a bullet and how come it's so deadly. It's kind of like you have a tiny little 9mm projectile that's hitting you, but it's hitting you with so much
It's not
transfer
tiny,
of
it's
kinetic
average.
energy. It's hitting you with so much transfer of kinetic energy that the shock kills you if nothing else. Now, if you fired a claymore with that same amount of kinetic energy hitting somebody, it would be nothing left.
Yeah.
So,
Victor, you could have it looks like a normal claymore, right?
Mhm.
Apart from maybe it glows slightly because of the magic, and inside it's full of tiny little metal claymores. Then as it explodes, it casts the enlarge spell.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's like those little those cocktail pick swords.
Cocktail swords.
Yeah.
we had a mage who did that in our 3.0 3.5 game. He had pre-programmed arrows and stuff like that had they were made to cast the enlarge spell as they were in flight. So they would start out as normal arrows, but when they would hit, they would impact and they would enlarge on impact, and so they would do like the next size up in damage.
They nerfed the old thing you used to be able to do with portable hulls and bags of holding with the arrows, the collapsible arrows, so it would force the portable hull into the bag of holding and create a sphere of annihilation.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't do that anymore. It opens a rift to another world instead.
Oh wow, well, it's because people found a way to mess with it.
Yeah.
50 Cent was hit with how many bullets and lived? Dude must be like a 20. Yeah, don't the hit points argument is a whole nother. That's a whole nother can of worms. That's a whole nother can of worms.
People do think that like you get hit once by a bullet and you just instantly dead. I mean, it's a bit more complex than that. I saw a video just yesterday, like some chick like went on a crime spree. She got like shot like 12 times by the cops and she lived. So yeah.
Have you seen that video of that guy being axed in the face while in line at like a 7-Eleven or something?
Was that in Australia? I think by some chick. Was it some crazy chick? Yeah,
some trans woman.
Yeah, that was like years
which
ago,
is-
but I remember that one. Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole
People
separate
survive
argument
weird
with hit
shit,
points.
and people
Yeah.
die from weird shit.
Yeah,
They do. I've heard of people who got impaled through the torso by things like pipes and stuff like that, and they're just fine until they remove it.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
that
there was
famous
that
story.
Yeah, the rail worker.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
literally about to mention that one with the
go on.
railroad spike. Yeah, like I don't even remember how it ended up in his head, but it like basically just like went right to his head and like it damaged his brain and it like changed his personality
Mm-hmm.
like completely. Yeah, it's funny that we both were.
Both went there at the same time.
Yeah,
That actually happened to my sensei.
Yeah.
He was being menaced by a rather large bully, who was like like serious threat level bully, like somebody who would break your limbs or kill you possibly.
yeah.
So Sensei had to he hid, waiting for this guy to come down a street or an alley or something like that, and he had this big 2x4 with nails in it, and he hit the guy, and the nails hit him in the head, and it kind of changed that guy's personality. He was a whole lot sweeter after that for some reason.
Mhm.
Oh, this guy turned into a complete asshole apparently. So yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, because it destroyed part of his frontal lobes.
Mhm.
So basically,
Yeah.
he was acting like a permanent teenager.
Dream Akuma has been stabbed 4 times. Not a fun time. Oh, you must be at least a 2nd or 3rd level fighter then. They
No.
were only rolling 1s on the damage.
He could be a first level fighter. Remember the veterans.
That's true. He could be a 1st level fighter.
I shouldn't talk about that topic anymore. It gets me mad.
There was the old White Wolf magazine that became Infobia, I think. They had some interesting articles on this kind of stuff and how most injuries you're either down, so either dead or unconscious, out, unable to do anything, or unaffected,
Yeah.
right? Despite whatever injury you've taken, because the adrenaline and so on just keeps you going a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, why no scurvy in RPGs? That is yet another kind of weird thing that we overlook in RPGs. It's like, where does all this fresh fruit come from?
Well,
'Cause-
most RPGs don't really handle diseases in general.
Not
No,
very
they
well,
don't.
no. They're a whole lot of no fun. I think is the problem with them.
Yeah,
Disempowering of the PC.
People don't want to. Your PC doesn't want to die from ergot. Which was a common disease.
And Kid Model was right. There was an explosion.
Yeah.
If you're playing an ocean-based game, just discover a new body of water and name it the Vitamin C, and then you'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Just be a Dutchman and name it after yourself. That's how Tasmania came to be. Albert Tasman.
William of Orange.
No, Tasmania is named after Albert Tasman, who was a Dutch sailor. And then New Zealand is named after a Dutch province, Zeeland.
Oh, yeah. Rose hips take care of scurvy. Yeah, but not everybody can afford roses. Apples contain vitamin. Do they?
Yeah.
Do they, though? Dying of rickets is not very heroic.
How about
or
vitamin
having your
D?
throat torn out by a wolf while you're sat in the river having dysentery? That's a terrible way to go.
Sounds
it's
like
never happened to
Lamentations of the
anybody.
Flame Princess.
No, that's that's Burning Wheel. Yeah, ergotism. Yeah, like I said, yeah, ergotism. Scurvy opens wounds. Yeah, PCs can't eat well over time. Those old scars up. Yes, that's right. That's kind of another topic, and we kind of addressed some of that in our very first video when we talked about clerical magic and clerical healing, kind of overcoming everything.
Yeah, and how.
Well, especially in 5e, like, do you even get scurvy if you have a good berry? That's just a cantrip. You can just make like magical berries like constantly and just eat them, and like, oh well, no scurvy. So yeah, 5e actually like removes a lot of like those old survival elements from like previous games, just because of all the powerful cantrips and stuff like that.
Well, that's why you want to play Shadow Dark, because it's a bridge between them.
Oh, it actually reminds me. I made a Victor makes a character for Shadow Dark.
I saw
Check it
that.
out.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I'm not dissing Shadow Dark. I think it's great that she's making money and and she's going to be so successful with it. My main misgiving with it is it's just kind of like, is this something you really need if you're already playing OSR?
What I don't like about it, and what I think a lot of people's reaction is based on, is it's nothing new. It doesn't deserve this level of success compared to a lot of other people who've been struggling away in the game mines for years and years. I would much rather Jim Radji got that money, but what can you do?
It's just one of those situations where it came out at just the right time. It's a female creator that definitely helps, like no two ways around it. She's already an established like adventure writer from the DMs Guild. She already had a name. She already had like some pretty powerful friends, like YouTubers and like all that stuff. And that her girlfriend or wife or whatever is like a professional, like what's the word, like not a promoter, but she's like in that whole business like of like
public relations.
Yeah, like that kind of stuff. So like everything. It was like just basically a perfect storm of everything. And like, more power to her. If I fucking could do that, I would do it too. So yeah,
I'm sure you would. Yeah, and like Lord, clerical healing is potentially better than modern. Yeah, we talked about that in our very first video, which you should go back and watch, by the way, because it was really good. But yeah.
Well, that has a knock-on effect for technology as well, because more people are surviving, more people are living longer. Cities have more people in them, so you have greater possibility of narrow fields of expertise and people working together. So yeah, knock-on effects, second and third order effects, man, they're killer.
Every time, it's like every time we you try to get away from the technology, it's kind of like, but wait, this steers you right back into it. So why are we stuck in the Middle Ages? I don't get it. All right. Yeah.
Lamentations has firearms.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Turns out the gods really do heal amputees, unless of course you're in a wheelchair, in which case they don't heal wheelchair bound people for some reason. I don't know. Which okay. There's another one for you right there. It's like, you could create the magical wheelchair, but you can't create the magic firearm.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
somebody had a question earlier about scars. The way I usually play it is if you just take like a healing potion, you just get like healed by a low level magic spell, whatever. That leaves scars, and that's where like the like in certain editions, like the critical hit table comes in. It's like, oh, you're like one of your eyes is blind now. You lost a hand or whatever. And then like the more powerful magic, that's like literally like what removes the scars or actually gives you your hand back or like gives you your eyesight back, that kind of stuff.
On a related note, and kind of as an outcropping from Shadow Dark, and into some other things I was thinking about. I blame Grim Dawn a little bit.
Good game.
I was thinking about incorporating this. We know, from the way clerical healing and stuff like that is described. As far as I can tell, it's basically what speeds up the bodily healing process and allows you to heal faster. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't just like magically, like shut the wound, seal it, and pump the blood back in and everything. That's why you get your hit points back. So I was thinking, if you really want to simulate this a little bit better, you could also add in as like anybody who receives magical healing during the course of combat, no matter how big, no matter how small, must immediately eat a meal afterward in order to replace the things that are lost. Because because like I said, it's not like we can sit around and eat a wheel of cheese and like heal cancer or anything, but we do know that vitamins, minerals, and other essential stuff is part of what speeds up our healing process in reality.
In the superhero game Underground, the regenerative powers required that you engage in cannibalism to regenerate.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, that does make sense if healing magic literally just boosts your like natural healing. And then you're like burning up calories to like heal. And there's this book series that I read, Monster Hunter International, and like the werewolves in that, they have like this massive healing factor, but it literally takes up like all these calories. So werewolves, like after they've like been shot like 20 times, they have to eat like half a cow to like get all those calories back. And the more they fight and the more they get shot, like the thinner and like more emaciated and stuff they get. So yeah.
Right. Well,
they start out like 600 pounds on mobility scooters charging into battle.
Yeah, pretty much.
But and the reason I'm thinking about using that as a regular rule is because it does use up a resource, and it does kind of keep the whole magic exists in a vacuum feeling that you get from a lot of stuff. Because like there's this huge tendency to fire and forget spells and not have any cost to it. It's like we already took, for the most part, material components out of games. How many people hand wave material components?
That is one thing I do like about Shadow Dark, that if you want to do the natural healing, you have to consume a ration.
Yeah. And that's kind of what that and like I said, Grim Dawn both kind of gave me the idea that you should have some kind of a consumable resource when you're using healing of any kind. I know Lord Fulminate adds a level of resource management. A lot of moderns don't like that kind of stuff, though. Well, you know what? Those are babies. I like resource management to a smaller extent. I'm not crazy. I'm not going to like break down the encumbrance tables to account for the smallest gold piece, but it seems reasonable to say that, okay, you just had a full bout of healing after having your guts ripped out. You really feel the need to eat afterward.
Yeah. Encumbrance is boring, but resource management can heighten the effects of certain things in games. It's important for survival horror type games, I think.
Yes.
Which some dungeon crawls can be, so that making the decision, do I carry that extra bag of gold or do I take that bundle of healing potions, which is most important, makes for consequential decisions.
Yeah. I like stuff like that. Yeah, I agree with you. Resource management adds game possibilities that are too often overlooked by modern gamers. Yeah, I agree. I like a little bit of resource management. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to be insane with it. It's just Just bring enough to the table that
Yes, some games go a little bit overboard.
yeah, it's a balancing act, I guess. But anyway, we're almost at the 2-hour mark, so it's probably a good time to go ahead and close down things, unless anybody has anything to add.
No, don't be afraid of guns or other technology.
Yeah, guns are cool. They go pew pew, and they do cool stuff.
Yeah, and that's kind of my thought too. Is like mechanically, it's no different than any other source of damage with an ammo type and a range. Don't treat it like it's going to change all life on your planet, unless it actually is, and that's up to you.
And
because there's other creations, there's other technologies that are going to do a lot to your planet as well, if that is.
Yeah, and if you want to run around Waterdeep with an AK-47 and Claymore mines, buy my book. Come on, do it. I need money. I need those bucks.
Victor is just relentlessly shilling his book.
Yes.
And there are
the pundit method.
and there are early modern gunpowder rules in Whitechester, which you should buy anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
It's cool.
Yes, you totally should.
Which I actually did recently. So yeah,
that's good.
Because I had to interview you on it. So I was like, I better buy it.
And since everybody else is shilling their stuff, I'm going to shill mine as well. So here you go. This is a link to my tip jar. If you found this program interesting, or if you found the conversation interesting, or the discussion interesting, and you feel like you enjoyed it, and you want to throw me a few dollars, it would help because I'm broke. but also the fact that we got to pay the bills. I'm paying $50 a month on StreamYard. So
Did you spend my tip on anything cool yet?
No, I'm hanging on to it because I gotta wait until.
I mean, come on, at least buy some tacos or something.
Buy a taco or something? Yeah, maybe I should. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. Who else are you going to give money to? Shadow Dark, they've got enough. Give T-shirt money.
Yeah, they were like. I looked yesterday while I was doing my video. They were like at 800,000 euros. It was insane. With 16 days to go, so they're probably going to hit over 1 million easily.
And Calvinoni, I appreciate that. Yeah, you gave last Sunday, and I'm not saying, guys, don't throw me your entire paycheck. I'm not going to have sex with you. So just a couple of bucks is fine. If you really enjoyed things, and I wouldn't even ask if I weren't so freaking broke right now. So honestly, I'm asking from a place of need at the moment, not from some desire to buy a Tesla or something. Because I definitely, I don't know. Well, there's probably a YouTuber out there that is rich enough from his YouTube channel that he could buy a Tesla, but I definitely ain't that person.
I need some rich friends.
I do too. I need some. Yeah, and that's money that WotC won't get. That's true, because I'm definitely not going to buy any WotC products with it. Speaking of which, let's see what we got coming up. Well, obviously, we've got the Weekend Geek coming up on Saturday. I do plan on having a painting stream at some time during the week where I'll just sit down and paint stuff and teach people kind of how to paint if you're interested in it. Because I'm kind of getting back into the habit of it. And tentatively, I would like to run another game just this week only, like a one-shot for people who haven't played some of our OSR games. I'm thinking about inviting Dungeon Delver because I know he's one of those, I only play first edition AD&D. I'm kind of like, well, yeah, but there's been like lots of games invented since then. You could stand to play one.
Well, this weekend, this Sunday, it's one of these.
Have you figured out
Island
which?
of the Piranha Man? That sounds awesome.
Yes.
What's the other one?
It's either Draconian Rhapsody or
Draconian Rhapsody.
Island of the Piranha Men.
They look the same.
Well, that's because they're part of a series that was written.
Oh, okay.
So.
What kind of game is it?
It's a very simplistic, somewhat cheesy fantasy game. but it's all in one. So it's the game and the adventure. They're meant to be like one shots you pick up off the shelf when you don't have anything else to play. Play through it
nice.
once. So not so much replayability, but just like a one shot or a fantasy movie kind of feel is what we're going for.
And Edge of Time says some guy resold Hot Wheels until they could buy a Tesla. Yeah. Well, there you go, Victor. There's life goals. Sell typewriters until you can buy a Tesla.
I mean, I am doing pretty well with the typewriters, but I'm not doing Tesla well.
I need to learn to resell something. Maybe I tried doing the miniature sales thing, but it started feeling more like work. So I'm not going to do that again.
We started with generic vintage items. We sold vases, like ashtrays, like everything that was vintage, like 1940s and upwards. And then that whole scene kind of died, and then we just moved into typewriters just in time. And yeah, we're doing really well with those. So
damn hipsters.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're definitely at the 2-hour mark. So thank y'all very much for hanging out with us today. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. I don't know if it brought anything new to your game or not, or if it will, but it's definitely food for thought.
Yeah.
It's for people who are world building, it's something to consider, and that's kind of what we'd like to talk about, is the stuff that makes a difference to your world as you try to create it.
Yeah.
Your game. So anyway, take care, and we will see you on Saturday for sure.
Yep. Bye, nerds.
Bye, guys. Take care.
Look, a Dungeons and Dragons ride!